Hello everyone and welcome back to the latest episode of An American in Thailand, airing every Friday. This program is broadcast to you from Rajmakon University of Technology, Peranakan, and it will come to you in two parts. For the first part, we will introduce a certain topic about being an American here in Thailand. It could be about culture, food, travel, current events, anything like that. And then we'll take a break, and in the second part of our episode, we will get into a little more detail, specifics, examples, things like that. We'll explain more about the topic we're discussing. All right, so let's get to our program. Welcome everyone, my name is Gary Gray and I am your host for An American in Thailand. I am an English teacher here at Rajmakon University of Technology, Peranakan, and I have been teaching here for we finished our 9 years, but I was going to say almost 9 years because I haven't actually been here 9 years, but that's only because the semester does not run a full 12 months, of course. So we just finished up my 9th year in terms of semesters, but I have not quite been here 9 years, but almost. I've been here almost 9 years. So I think I have a pretty good feel for the Thai culture. I'm still learning new things every day, but I have a pretty good feel for it. So that's why we're doing this program, An American in Thailand, where we like to talk about differences. A lot of times it's cultural differences between Thailand and the United States. When I say I'm an American, sometimes people from Canada or Mexico get bothered by that because they're also quote-unquote Americans because they're from North America. Yes, but we don't have any other name for it. For people from the United States, it's the United States of America, which is why we're called Americans. So we don't mean to offend anyone when we call ourselves Americans. Some people do get bothered by that, in case they get bothered by that, because they're also Americans, Canadians, Mexicans, frankly, anyone from North America, Central America, South America. Technically, they're all Americans. But yes, people from the United States do call themselves Americans. We don't have any other word for it. For example, we don't say United Staters. That's not a thing. We don't call ourselves that. All right, so I'd just like to point that out because some people occasionally get offended when people from the United States call themselves Americans because they think we are suggesting that people from Canada aren't from America, and they are from North America, so they are Americans also. In that sense, as far as the continent is concerned, everyone from North America and South America is American. Everyone from Central America and the Caribbean is technically actually part of North America, so they are also Americans. I should be clear when I say everyone from Central America is part of North America. Technically, I'm not sure about this, but I think Panama, the furthest south place in Central America, I think it's split between North and South America. But I'm not sure of that. It may be all North America, but it may be split in half. So I don't want to say anything incorrect here, so I will leave that at that. All right, so anyway, so what are we going to talk about today? So what we're going to talk about today is the upcoming rainy season. As we air this, it is around the middle of April in 2026. So the rainy season is coming up here in Thailand pretty soon. And there's a big thing going on in the weather and climate. For those of you who watch this program regularly, which I suspect is not a lot of you. I don't think we don't have huge viewership here, but for those of you who do watch or listen to this regularly, you may know that my background is actually as a scientist. I'm a weather scientist back in America. I took some classes, did some work to become a teacher, to teach English here in Thailand. But prior to that, I was a weather scientist in America. And so we have a big thing coming up this year, which is the strongest El Nino ever. Okay, so what is El Nino? What does that mean? All right, so El Nino is measured by warm water in the eastern Pacific. Now, we're not near the eastern Pacific here. We're near the western Pacific and the Indian Ocean. Since weather kind of moves from east to west here, you could say we're more affected by the western Pacific than the Indian Ocean, even though we're a little closer to the Indian Ocean. So our weather here in Thailand is affected by the western Pacific. But El Nino is measured in the eastern Pacific. So El Nino is warm water that builds up in the eastern Pacific. So what causes that? Well, that's important to understand what happens in the western Pacific, near us here in Thailand. The weather that's going to affect us. All right, so it's caused by the winds. When wind blows across the water, it blows the water in the tropics. It usually blows from east to west, so it blows the water westward. And when the water moves west, the water that replaces it comes up from underneath the surface. And so that's colder water because it doesn't see the sunlight, right? It doesn't get the sunshine. It's below the surface. So that's colder water. So when that wind is stronger, it brings up more cold water. When the wind is weaker, it brings up less cold water, and it leaves warmer water at the top. And right now, we're seeing less wind. So more warm water is being left at the top. And again, it goes from east to west. So that means that warm water is mostly being left on the top in the east because that's where it starts from, right? So that makes sense, right? It starts in the east. You have less wind. And so the water just sits there, soaking up more and more and more and more sun. And that warm water is not blown west into the western Pacific. So the western Pacific ends up colder because we don't have that warm water coming across. So that is what we're expecting this summer. That is what an El Nino is. That's what causes it. It's the winds. It's the winds in the tropics that cause, whether you get an El Nino or the opposite effect is called a La Nina. That's where you have really strong winds. So it blows all that warm water off to the west. So that cold water underneath the surface comes up and it ends up cold in the eastern Pacific and warm in the western Pacific. So, 2026 is expected to be a record-breaking El Nino. That's warm water in the eastern Pacific, which the eastern Pacific doesn't matter to us. It's thousands of miles away, doesn't matter. But it matters because it usually means colder water in the western Pacific, which does matter to us. That affects our weather here in Thailand. I will say, though, that this is debatable as far as whether or not it's going to actually be a record El Nino. Yes, the waters in the eastern Pacific are expected to reach record levels. However, because of climate change, the entire globe, all of the water, or most of it, I shouldn't say all, there are some cooler pockets out there, but almost all of the water is above normal. So if you were to adjust kind of relative to normal, maybe it's not a record. Maybe it's not a record El Nino. And that matters because of the effects. We're going to talk about that in the second half of our program, like what the effects are. The fact that it's going to be a possible record El Nino that has impacts here in Thailand on the weather we're going to see for the upcoming 2026 rainy season. Like I said, as we're recording this and airing this, it's kind of the middle of April of 2026. So we're at the start of the rainy season, although it doesn't really begin for another month and a half. So we'll see what happens when it gets here. But there are some questions about whether or not this is truly a record El Nino that's going to occur and what it means. So, in the second half of our program, we will discuss what it means for Thailand. All right, let's take a quick break. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so we're talking about the upcoming El Nino. El Nino. That is a word that's describing, well, it's two words actually. El Nino. It means the baby. And it comes from, it's a Spanish phrase, but it means warm water in the eastern Pacific. That's important to know because in the western Pacific, the waters would actually be the opposite direction. So it's cold water in the western Pacific. All right, so what does that mean for Thailand? Okay, so it's important to understand how the atmosphere, how the weather works. Warm water means more evaporation. It's hotter, when you turn on the stove, you have water boiling on the stove, it steams. Obviously, the ocean doesn't get that hot. But still, the warmer it is, the more evaporation happens. So the water evaporates into the air. So the warmer the water, the more you get evaporation. Also, warm air rises. So you have that warmth, goes into the air, and that air rises. So it's more likely to create clouds and rain. Also, it's important to know that the amount of energy that can be stored in water is much more that can be stored in air. So when the water heats up and then starts giving off that energy to the air, like it warms the air above it, it can do that almost infinitely. It can just keep doing that because there's so much energy in the warm water. The only time you see it actually start losing that energy is when there's basically a severe storm. When you see a hurricane or typhoon move over that water, it can cool the water. And really, that's as much due to it mixing up the water, so it brings up colder water from underneath. It's as much due to that as it is actually using up the energy. I mean, the air almost can't use up the energy from the ocean. That's how big the difference is. So warm water is a really big deal for the weather because it can just pretty much feed the weather endlessly. All right, so when you have that warm water, again, you're going to get more evaporation, more rising motion, which is what creates clouds. You know, you get this warm, moist air. It goes up high in the atmosphere. It cools down. In a recent episode, I explained why that happens. So it cools down, so then the water condenses, so the moisture condenses back into water, forms clouds and rain. So that's what the warm water is doing. It's creating more clouds, more rain, more storms, all of that. So that's what an El Nino is. But that's warm water in the eastern Pacific. Here in the western Pacific, closer to us, the water's going to be colder. And so that means exactly the opposite. You don't get that evaporation. You don't get that rising motion. You don't get those storms and that extra rain. So instead, what we will normally get here in Thailand during an El Nino event is extreme heat, because you don't have the rain and clouds to help cool things down. You get drought. Again, no rain. So you get a drought during the rainy season. And that can cause agricultural trouble. You can't grow your crops very well if there's no rain. It can be bad for energy costs. You may need to crank up your air conditioner because it's hotter outside, because there aren't clouds, there's no rain, there's nothing to cool things off, so it ends up really hot during the rainy season. And it can make the air quality worse. The way rain happens, a raindrop has to form around something. There's some sort of dust particle, whatever it may happen to be, in the atmosphere. And so when it rains, a lot of these raindrops are forming around all of the nasty stuff that's in the atmosphere. All of the PM 2.5 that you're breathing. Raindrops will form around that. And so if it rains a lot, it will clean out the air. The raindrop will form around those PM 2.5 particles and fall out of the sky. It'll clean out the air. So the air quality will be worse if we're getting less rain. But I should emphasize again that there is some uncertainty. We don't know. It is pretty well known. We are pretty sure that it's going to be a record level El Nino. But again, you have to keep in mind the global warming issue. So let me explain. Overall, of course, it does look bad for the 2026 rainy season. it looks like that we're probably not going to have a lot of rain. But there is some hope and there is some uncertainty due to the ocean warmth. So again, let me explain this again, why there's some uncertainty. Because of climate change, almost all of the water and the air is hotter than normal. So is it really going to be a record El Nino? So let me explain what I mean there. So the temperatures are expected to be like maybe 4 degrees Celsius above normal in the Eastern Pacific. But here's the thing. Due to climate change, the entirety of all of the oceans across the globe are maybe about 2 degrees Celsius above normal. 1, 2, something like that. So 3 to 4 degrees Celsius above normal is still warm. It's actually very warm. As I mentioned earlier, the ocean can hold a lot more energy. So even just 1 degree is a big deal when you're talking about energy within the ocean. So sure, definitely have an El Nino coming. But that 3 degrees or whatever it's going to be above normal, if you adjust it relative to the global ocean temperatures, it may only be about 1 to 2 degrees above normal. So is that really a record? It may not be. So how bad is it going to be? Are we really going to see record droughts? Are we going to see that terrible of a rainy season? There is some hope that we will at least get a good amount of rain. I mean, obviously, we hope it's not enough to cause a lot of flooding. I mean, we don't want that. But we want enough to help agriculture. And maybe cool things off a bit. And keep the air quality decent. So we may still see that. All we can do is wait and see. Let's wait and see what happens. I will tell you that right now, it doesn't look very good for our rainy season. But I wouldn't be overly worried. I wouldn't be panicking like, oh my God, it's not going to rain at all this year because of this El Nino. It's a record El Nino. Oh God, we're not going to get any rain. All the crops are going to die. The air quality is going to be terrible. It's going to be 40 degrees Celsius all summer. No. Let's wait and see what happens. It is possible that this rainy season, it's still probably going to be no matter what, because it's still going to be an El Nino year. Yeah, the rainy season's probably going to be a little bit dry. Air quality is going to be a little bit bad. The heat's going to be a little bit bad. It's probably going to be at least not a great rainy season. We're going to get too little rain, too much heat, too much bad air. Yes, that's probably going to happen. But as far as record-breaking, is this going to be some severe, massive, horrible rainy season? I would say we need to wait and see. All right, so let's see what happens in the coming months. But I just wanted to post this out there and discuss this because my background is actually in the weather when I was back in the U.S., so I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Being that this is expected to be a record-breaking El Nino. So it could be a big deal. And not in a good way, unfortunately. But again, it's nothing to panic about just yet. Let's wait and see what happens. It's not clear that it's going to be a disastrous rainy season. We don't really know. we'll have to just wait and see what happens. But it's worth being aware of. You should know that this is what we're looking at. It's a possibility, maybe, that we will be facing a pretty severe rainy season. And when I say severe rainy season, you probably think, oh, lots of rain. No, I mean in the other direction. I mean no rain. Bad for agriculture. Bad for heat. Very hot. Bad for air quality. All of those sorts of things. Let's hope not. Let's wait and see what happens. But I just want you to be aware of that that's a possibility. All right, so that's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of An American in Thailand. Any young people out there, if you're thinking about heading off to college, university, in the next year or so, please consider our university, Ratchamakan University of Technology, Pranakon. All right, please stay with us and tune back in next week for another interesting episode. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.